Last week, a 62-year-old marathoner sat in my office furious. She'd cut sodium for 8 months straight, tracked every meal in an app, stayed under 200 milliliters daily, religiously, walked 5 miles every morning, lost 15 pounds, quit wine completely. Blood pressure, still 148/92. She looked at me with genuine anger and said, "What the hell am I doing wrong? I've done everything, and nothing's working." I told her something that completely changed her perspective. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just fighting the wrong battle. I'm Dr. Eric Topol, a cardiologist who's treated hypertensive patients for over 30 years, and I've had this exact conversation more times than I can count. Here's what most physicians miss, and what I explained to her. Your blood pressure isn't being controlled by the sodium you eat. It's being controlled by a hormonal signal that never shuts off. Within 10 days of addressing this signal, without changing a single food she ate, without increasing exercise, without new medications, her blood pressure dropped to 132/84. 2 weeks later, 124/78, completely normalized. Today, I'm showing you the hormonal mechanism keeping blood pressure elevated in otherwise healthy people, why sodium restriction fails for millions, and the simple timing intervention that allows your kidneys to reset blood pressure naturally. The answer up front. Chronic insulin elevation from continuous eating keeps your kidneys in permanent sodium retention mode. Creating insulin-low windows breaks this cycle, often within 48 hours. Let me show you the mechanism your doctor isn't checking. The sodium restriction that doesn't work. For 5 decades, we've taught hypertensive patients a simple formula: high sodium talc water retention, chow, elevated blood pressure. The solution seemed obvious: cut sodium aggressively and blood pressure will fall. But here's what I observe in clinical practice every single week. Patient A, cut sodium from 3,800 milliliters to 1,500 milliliters daily. Blood pressure drops from 156/94 to 128/82. Problem solved. Patient B, cut sodium from 3,800 milliliters to 1,500 milliliters daily. Blood pressure drops from 156/94 to 152/90. Minimal change, maximum frustration, same dietary intervention, wildly different outcomes. Why does sodium restriction work brilliantly for some people and fail completely for others? Because for a substantial percentage of adults, particularly those over 50, hypertension isn't primarily a sodium problem at all. It's a hormonal problem that sodium restriction cannot override. That hormone is insulin, and it's controlling your blood pressure in ways that have nothing to do with how much salt you eat. Insulin, the blood pressure signal nobody measures. When patients hear insulin, they immediately think about diabetes and blood sugar. But insulin has profound direct effects on blood pressure through three distinct pathways that most cardiologists never discuss with patients. Pathway number one, direct renal sodium retention. Insulin binds to receptors in the proximal tubule of your kidney nephrons. When this happens, it activates two specific sodium transporters: the epithelial sodium channel, ENaC, and the sodium hydrogen exchanger 3, NHE3. Translation into plain language: insulin directly commands your kidneys to hold on to sodium instead of excreting it into urine. This isn't a side effect. This is a direct, immediate action. Pathway number two, sympathetic nervous system activation. Insulin stimulates your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight branch of your autonomic nervous system. Specifically, it increases norepinephrine release, creating a state of mild but persistent sympathetic activation. What this looks like physiologically: heart rate stays slightly elevated, blood vessels stay slightly constricted, vascular resistance remains elevated. Pathway number three, impaired vascular relaxation. Insulin interferes with nitric oxide, NO, production in your blood vessel endothelium. Nitric oxide is your body's primary vasodilator, the molecule that tells blood vessels to relax and open up. Simultaneously, insulin amplifies the effects of vasoconstrictors like angiotensin II and endothelin 1. Net result: your blood vessels lose their ability to fully relax. they remain in a state of partial constriction. Now here's the critical point that changes everything. All three of these effects are completely normal and physiologically appropriate if insulin rises briefly after meals and then falls back to baseline within 2 to 3 hours. The catastrophic problem occurs when insulin never gets the chance to fall. The eating pattern, keeping insulin chronically elevated. Let me walk you through what I see in patient food diaries every single day. This is a real example from that marathoner I mentioned, her actual eating pattern before we made changes. 6:30 a.m., breakfast, steel-cut oats with blueberries, almond butter, 9 a.m., mid-morning snack, Greek yogurt with granola, 12 hours p.m., lunch, quinoa bowl with grilled chicken, vegetables, 3 p.m., afternoon snack, apple with peanut butter, 6 p.m., dinner, baked salmon, sweet potato, broccoli, 8:30 p.m., evening snack, handful of almonds. Look at this eating pattern carefully. Every single food choice is nutritious. Nothing here is junk food. This woman is making excellent dietary choices by conventional nutrition standards. But here's what's happening at the hormonal level. Each eating event triggers insulin secretion, regardless of food quality. When eating events occur every 2.5 to 3 hours from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m., a 14-hour eating window, insulin never returns to true baseline. Instead of this healthy pattern, insulin rises sharply, falls to baseline, rises sharply, falls to baseline. She's creating this pattern. Insulin rises, stays moderately elevated, rises higher, stays moderately elevated, rises higher, never fully drops. The result is chronic moderate hyperinsulinemia, a state where insulin remains elevated enough for long enough to keep all three blood pressure elevating mechanisms activated continuously. This creates a clinical picture I encounter constantly. Labs look like this. Fasting glucose, 94 mdl, perfectly normal. HbA1c, 5.3%, excellent. Lipid panel, optimal fasting insulin, 16 miu/ml, elevated but almost never checked. Physical exam, blood pressure, 148/92, hypertensive. BMI, 23, normal weight. Active lifestyle, excellent diet quality. The patient is confused. The physician is confused. Nobody understands why blood pressure won't respond to sodium restriction. The answer: the kidneys are responding to a hormonal signal, not dietary sodium. Why your kidneys ignore your sodium restriction. Your kidneys are exquisitely hormone-sensitive organs. They respond to hormonal signals far more powerfully than dietary composition. When insulin remains chronically elevated, the signal being transmitted to your kidneys is unambiguous and continuous. Retain sodium, activate ENA-C, activate NHE3, do not release sodium into urine. This hormonal command operates 24 hours a day. So even when you're eating extremely low sodium, 200 milliliter or 1,000 milliliter or even 800 milliliter daily, your kidneys are still holding on to the sodium you do consume because the hormonal signal telling them to release it never arrives. Let me give you an analogy that makes this crystal clear. Think of your circulatory system as a water tank. Sodium is the water flowing in. Your kidneys are the drain valve at the bottom. Cutting sodium, turning down the inflow of water that helps reduce the rate at which the tank fills. But if the drain valve stays closed, the tank still fills up, just more slowly. Chronic insulin elevation, keeping the drain valve closed. Even with minimal water flowing in, pressure builds because there's no outflow. This is why patients can restrict sodium to 1,000 milligrams daily and still maintain blood pressures of 150/92. The problem isn't the inflow rate. The problem is that the outflow valve is hormonally locked shut. The morning blood pressure surge nobody explains. Many hypertensive patients report a specific pattern that confuses them. My blood pressure is always highest first thing in the morning, before I've done anything stressful, before I've had coffee, before I've even gotten out of bed. The conventional explanation blames this on the morning cortisol surge or natural circadian blood pressure variation. But there's often a much more direct, actionable cause: late-night eating. Here's the precise mechanism. When you eat at 8:30 p.m. or 9 p.m., even something relatively healthy like nuts or Greek yogurt, insulin rises and remains elevated for 3 to 4 hours. If you eat at 8:30 p.m. and go to bed at 10:30 p.m., insulin is still exerting its blood pressure elevating effects well past midnight throughout a significant portion of your sleep. During this time, your kidneys continue retaining every milligram of sodium you consumed that day. Your sympathetic nervous system never fully downregulates into parasympathetic dominance. Your blood vessel endothelium doesn't get its critical recovery window to produce nitric oxide and restore vasodilation. You wake up with elevated intravascular volume from overnight sodium retention, heightened sympathetic tone, nervous system never fully calmed, constricted vasculature, blood vessels never fully relaxed. Your blood pressure is already elevated at 6 a.m. before your alarm even goes off. Over weeks and months, this nightly pattern resets your baseline blood pressure higher. You're perpetually starting each day metabolically behind. The lean person with resistant hypertension. Here's a clinical presentation that baffles patients and frustrates physicians. A 58-year-old man walks into my office. BMI 24, normal. Visible muscle definition, runs 15 miles per week, eats what any nutritionist would call an exemplary diet. Blood pressure, 152 on 94. He's genuinely bewildered. I'm not overweight. I don't eat processed food. I exercise regularly. How the hell do I have high blood pressure? This brings us to one of the most underappreciated truths in metabolic medicine. Normal body weight does not guarantee metabolic health. The critical variable isn't your total body fat percentage, it's your fat distribution, specifically the ratio of visceral adipose tissue to subcutaneous adipose tissue. Subcutaneous fat, the fat directly under your skin, relatively metabolically inert, doesn't significantly interfere with insulin signaling, not particularly problematic for metabolic health. Visceral fat, fat packed around internal organs, particularly surrounding the liver and pancreas, highly metabolically active secretes inflammatory cytokines, TNFA, IL-6, that directly impair insulin receptor function, releases free fatty acids that create hepatic and muscle insulin resistance. When visceral fat accumulates, even in people with normal BMI and visible abdominal muscle definition, it creates a condition called visceral adiposity-associated insulin resistance. Here's what happens. Your muscle and liver cells become insulin resistant due to the inflammatory environment created by visceral fat. To compensate and keep blood glucose normal, your pancreas secretes more insulin. Result, fasting glucose, 92 milligrams DL, looks perfect. HbA1c, 5.4%, looks perfect. Fasting insulin, 18 MIU/mL, chronically elevated, but nobody checks this. Blood pressure, elevated because chronically elevated insulin is keeping kidneys in sodium retention mode, sympathetic nervous system activated, and blood vessels constricted. This is why a lean-appearing athletic person can have insulin-driven hypertension that's indistinguishable from someone who's visibly overweight. The problem isn't visible subcutaneous fat, it's invisible visceral fat creating metabolic dysfunction and chronic hyperinsulinemia. The 3 eating patterns maintaining hypertension. After reviewing thousands of patient food diaries over 30-plus years, I've identified 3 extremely common eating patterns that maintain chronic insulin elevation and treatment-resistant hypertension. Pattern number 1, continuous grazing, eating every 2 to 3 hours throughout waking hours. This pattern was heavily promoted in the 1990s and early 2000s as beneficial for boosting metabolism. The theory that frequent small meals would keep metabolic rate elevated and prevent muscle loss. Physiologically, this theory is completely backwards for blood pressure control. Each eating event, even a 150-calorie snack, triggers insulin secretion. When eating events occur every 2.5 hours from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., a 14-hour eating window with 5-6 eating events, insulin never achieves true baseline between meals. Your body remains in a perpetual postprandial fed state. The hormonal signals for sodium retention, sympathetic activation, and vascular constriction never turn off. Result: kidneys retain sodium for 14 plus hours daily. Blood pressure never gets a recovery window. Pattern number 2, liquid calorie stacking. Smoothies, protein shakes, green juices, even nutrient-dense whole food versions. Liquid calories are absorbed extremely rapidly. They spike insulin quickly and maintain elevation longer because they're typically carbohydrate-dense and provide minimal protein or fat to slow absorption. Additionally, liquid calories provide almost no satiety. People consume them as additions to solid meals rather than replacements. Real example from a patient: 7:00 a.m., solid breakfast, oatmeal eggs; 9:30 a.m., green smoothie, spinach, banana, berries, protein powder; 12 p.m., solid lunch, chicken, rice, vegetables. That's 3 insulin spiking events in 5 hours. Insulin never drops. The patient thinks, "I'm eating healthy, nutrient-dense foods." The kidneys experience: insulin signal has been continuous for 5 hours. Continue retaining sodium. Pattern number 3, late night eating within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime. This is, in my clinical experience, the single most impactful modifiable factor for resistant morning hypertension. As I explained earlier, late night eating keeps insulin elevated throughout sleep, precisely when your body should be in its deepest metabolic rest state, allowing kidneys to release sodium, sympathetic tone to fully calm, and blood vessels to recover and produce nitric oxide. When this recovery period is disrupted nightly by late eating, you wake up every morning with elevated blood volume, retained sodium overnight, activated sympathetic tone, never fully relaxed, constricted vasculature, never fully dilated. Your baseline blood pressure resets higher. Morning readings stay stubbornly elevated. The fix: creating insulin low windows. The solution to insulin-driven hypertension isn't intermittent fasting, ketogenic diets, or severe caloric restriction. It's much simpler and more sustainable. Create extended daily periods where insulin can genuinely return to baseline and stay there. I call these insulin low windows, stretches of time, ideally 12-16 hours, where zero caloric intake occurs and insulin remains at true fasting baseline. Here's the exact protocol I gave that marathoner from the beginning of this video. Change. For 1, eliminate all between meal snacks. 3 meals per day, 0 snacks between them. If meals are spaced 5 to 6 hours apart, insulin has adequate time to fall to baseline between eating events. Change. Number 2, compress your eating window to 10 hours. Start eating at 7 a.m. Finish your last bite of food by 5 p.m. That creates a 14-hour overnight fasting window where insulin remains at baseline throughout sleep. Change. Number 3, make dinner your smallest meal. Breakfast, largest meal. Lunch, medium meal. Dinner, smallest meal, eaten early by 5 to 6 p.m. This aligns eating with circadian insulin sensitivity. You're most insulin sensitive in the morning and ensures insulin is low during the critical overnight recovery period. Change. Number 4, 0 liquid calories. Outside mealtimes, water, black coffee, unsweetened tea only. No smoothies, protein shakes, juice, or any caloric beverage consumed separately from solid meals. What happens when insulin falls? The physiological cascade. When you create consistent insulin low windows, a sequence of beneficial physiological changes occurs in a predictable time course. 12-48 hours, renal response initiates. ENAC and NHE3 sodium transporter activity decreases urinary sodium, excretion increases. You'll notice increased urination. Intravascular volume begins normalizing, blood pressure starts dropping, often 5-8 points systolic in first 48 hours. 2-7 days. Sympathetic tone normalizes, baseline norepinephrine levels decrease. Resting heart rate drops 5 to 10 bpm, heart rate variability improves, shift toward parasympathetic dominance, peripheral vascular resistance decreases 1 to 2 weeks, vascular function restores endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS. Activity increases, nitric oxide production returns to normal, Flow-mediated dilation improves, measurable via ultrasound. Arterial compliance increases, blood vessels regain elasticity, 2 to 4 weeks. Blood pressure stabilizes at new baseline. Systolic pressure typically drops 10-18 points. Diastolic pressure typically drops 6-12 points. Morning blood pressure surge diminishes or resolves. Blood pressure becomes more stable throughout day, less variability. Clinical result. Patients often achieve blood pressure normalization within 2 to 4 weeks. No medication changes, no sodium restriction changes, no weight loss required, just creating consistent hormonal windows where insulin can fall and kidneys can respond appropriately. That marathoner's actual results. Remember the 62-year-old marathoner who was furious in my office? Here's exactly what we changed. What we did not change, her food choices. She continued eating the exact same foods. Her sodium intake stayed at 1-200 rating daily. Her exercise routine continued running 20-25 miles weekly. Her medications stayed on same low-dose lisinopril. What we did change, eliminated all snacks, went from 6 eating events daily to 3 meals, moved dinner from 7:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. No food or caloric beverages after 5:30 p.m., created a 13.5-hour overnight fast, 5:30 p.m. to 7:00 a.m. Results. Day 10, blood pressure 148/92, 132/84, resting heart rate 68, 62 BPM. Subjective, I'm sleeping better and I'm not getting up to pee at 3 a.m. anymore. Translation, her kidneys were finally releasing sodium overnight instead of retaining it. Results, week 3, blood pressure 124/78, completely normalized. Fasting insulin 16, 7 MIU/mL, dropped to optimal range. We tapered and discontinued lisinopril under close supervision. Results, 3 months, blood pressure remains 122, 128, 76, 82, stable normotension. Off all blood pressure medications, running faster, improved vascular function, wanted better oxygen delivery, lost 4 additional pounds without trying, correcting hyperinsulinemia, improved fat oxidation. She sent me a text message. I can't believe the answer was this simple. Why didn't anyone tell me about insulin? Why this matters far beyond blood pressure numbers. Chronic hypertension isn't just an abstract number on a blood pressure cuff. It represents continuous, relentless mechanical stress to 4 critical organ systems. Cardiac impact, left ventricular hypertrophy, heart muscle thickens abnormally. Diastolic dysfunction, heart becomes stiff, can't relax properly. Progressive path toward heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Renal impact, glomerular hyperfiltration, and sclerosis. Progressive nephron loss, you lose functional kidney units, eventual chronic kidney disease requiring dialysis, cerebrovascular impact, accelerated cerebral small vessel disease, white matter hyperintensities, visible brain damage on MRI, vascular cognitive impairment and dementia, dramatically increased stroke risk, vascular impact, endothelial dysfunction throughout arterial tree, accelerated atherosclerosis in coronary, carotid, and peripheral arteries, arterial stiffening, loss of compliance, earlier development of aortic aneurysms. When you normalize blood pressure by addressing the root cause, chronic hyperinsulinemia, you're not just improving one metric on your medical chart, you're protecting these organ systems from decades of cumulative damage. This is the difference between living independently, cognitively intact, and physically capable into your mid-80s, versus developing heart failure in your early 70s, requiring dialysis by 75, or experiencing cognitive decline and loss of independence by 78. Insulin-driven hypertension is completely reversible. The downstream organ damage is not. Closing thoughts. That 62-year-old marathoner wasn't failing at blood pressure management. She wasn't undisciplined. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Her body was responding exactly as it's designed to respond to a persistent hormonal signal commanding it to retain sodium, renal mechanism, maintain sympathetic activation, nervous system mechanism, keep blood vessels constricted, vascular mechanism. No amount of sodium restriction could overcome that hormonal override. But when we gave insulin the opportunity to fall by eliminating snacks, compressing her eating window, and finishing dinner early, her kidneys did exactly what they're supposed to do: released sodium, normalized blood volume, allowed blood pressure to reset. If you're restricting sodium aggressively, exercising regularly, maintaining healthy body weight, and your blood pressure still won't budge, you're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not just getting old, you're experiencing insulin-driven hypertension, and it's entirely fixable. 3 simple changes: stop snacking between meals, finish dinner by 6 p.m., create a 12-14-hour overnight fast. Your kidneys will handle the rest. Give your body the hormonal space to reset. It knows what to do. This is Dr. Eric Topol. Your blood pressure isn't a character flaw, it's a hormonal signal that can be corrected.